I was going to think about writing down how I felt, but I thought instead what I could do is a video of how I'm feeling. And in a nutshell, October is kicking my ass. 2014 was a year that seemed like, at the time, I got broadsided by how 2015 started, but 2014 was the runway. And it was the runway for wrapping up my marriage. February, Valentine's Day dinner out was a road trip up to Duncan, punctuated with an all-you-can-eat buffet, Chinese food buffet that was not very good. My birthday, we skipped, as Cheryl said. Well, you know what? You don't like birthdays, so I'm not going to get you anything. We're not going to do anything. And I sort of nudged her in an upgrade to a hat. Her birthday was punctuated with a fight with the next door neighbors, an actual physical fight, and police intervention. Our anniversary was really underwhelming. Just so be it. Christmas was going to be one where we're still rebuilding from kind of our crushed finances, and what I had to do was we had bought basically nothing, except I broke that rule, so we bought a lot more than we should have. And a day or two before Christmas, the cat went into the hospital to basically die, and that tapped out all of our remaining money so that he could die on Boxing Day or the 27th. Happy New Year's. In November, I started seeing my partner. My wife and I opened up the relationship. And by December, I could just tell that my new partner was who I needed to be with, and that the wrap up of the marriage was just imminent. Just was. I got into January, and we kind of did the coup de grace on the marriage, and I reacted to a lot of revelations super poorly. I could have gone one of two ways. I could have played for sympathy from all parties and probably got a lot of sympathy, or I could have done a scorched earth vengeance. So I did the latter. I told a lot of people they were dead to me. One or two of them kind of skulked off and didn't care. One or two kind of wrote very long emails defending their position and making their position. And that was that. So then began me being in a rampage of feeling hurt and cheated, because I was cheated on. And it really left me in a bad place. And it really couldn't have been a good place, but I think the nature of how I presented myself was the variable. And instead of imploding because I was hurt and trying to move past the trauma, I instead just stuck in that doorway. I've heard it described well that trauma is a doorway. And in our world, we're not time travelers, we go forward. So when we hit this doorway of trauma, it can be a moment that just continually reenacts itself. And then after that, you're pushed through the doorway and into the future that you're supposed to have. But you can never go to the past. You can never rewind back to the trauma. And the trauma and the injury is never going to be equaled by the amount of repair that shows up. You can never have a magical ambulance show up to make you better than you started. And that's always the hope, but I think it always feels like you're losing a limb, and the best you can do is a really good stump. So trauma leaves you stuck, and that's where I left myself stuck. And it was hard because I didn't have time for repair. I couldn't take myself out to the shop. At the job I was at, there was no provision for sick time. So basically all the time I lost because of the breakup and all the cleanup of the breakup had to be time made up later on. So I went through separation, a move out, prep for divorce, the whole deal, without losing any time at work. thought, well, carpe diem, I'm going to go off to Europe. So I went off to Europe, came back, and discovered my mom had cancer, and that I wasn't sure how long we'd have, but we ended up at 4 months. So it went from the split to me being out to sea with me being kind of an emotional wreck to me prepping to have my new partner and her son move in with my daughter and myself and eject my wife, which felt good and bad at the same time. And it just felt like it had to happen because the logic was there was enough room for 4 people, no reason to have not that room's used on 2 people. So we did it. So I went from getting ready for the house to 10 days in Europe to coming back to find out my mom is dying to all of that 4 months of the messy business of how that all plays out. Double down, I ended up getting a really good job offer from a really lousy company that I took. And 4 days after I started my new job, my mom died. So that meant my head wasn't in the game, so I was sprinting to catch up with the job. I was mourning. I was mourning the loss of my marriage. I was the executor for a will with a bunch of people who really were not going to make it easy on me, so they didn't. So that distracted me. So I would have lost the job anyways, but that really put a cinch on it. So that let me roll into January, and I probably was at the decision point where I had all the grounds and opportunity to go on disability for a short time and just recover, just cluster in. But I was freaked out about what would happen to my finances mid and long term, so I didn't do that. So instead, I went back to the job that I had left that was good enough to take me back because they're awesome. And I tried to make a go of it there with some time for consulting, which meant a sprint through consulting where you're always challenged to have your business rules put in place or your business rules are going to be broken by somebody else. So it leaves you in a position where you're always fighting for your position in your business to offer what it's supposed to offer. And in talking with some people, I discovered that really isn't a weird and exceptional situation, that a lot of businesses are perpetually challenged to offer, to have their consistent product and their consistent service offerings kind of pushed out of the lane by somebody wanting it their way. So it just means a lot of heavy driving on part of that. So coming into this October, a little bit past my second wedding anniversary sans marriage, which last year was distracted because my mom was dying and I was starting a new job, and this year, no distractions. I just was able to really dwell on it for no good reason other than, there you go, stuck in the doorway of trauma. And then 2 weeks after the defunct wedding anniversary is the first anniversary of my mom dying. So I kind of felt like the shell shock of October was getting more and more profound. And as I've thought more about where I am and how this feeling of hurt really gets to be more significant as the days go on, I just really am hyper aware of the trauma I'm feeling, and that I feel sufficiently stuck, that I'm angry that I live in Victoria because the cost of living is so high that you can't take a breather. You can't say, well, I'll have 3 months off work, thank you very much. Or you can't say, well, I'll just find an extra $500 a month for counseling. Those nice things aren't in the cards. So this DIY version to making repairs isn't working. And that's where I'm at. And it does lead me, the very particular question of how am I going to continue to be the walking wounded? Because I am dishing out harm to a lot of people, and I just know it. Just is. And in addition to being the walking wounded, I wonder how many other people are also the walking wounded. I wonder how many people have been broadsided by stuff and they're just not able to make repairs. They're not able to get off a treadmill. They're not able to access support. They don't have people who care about them. And how many people are out there just kind of out to sea, stuck? You referenced the movie Titanic, and Jack was stuck on a door, and that was his calamity. And instead, there's a lot of people who are stuck in doorways, drowning. That's their calamity. And anyways, that's the big picture thing. Back to what centrally concerns me, which is I'm here now. I recognize I have problems. I recognize that I have to do something about them. And I found recently that coming out and saying things out loud is massive. And I have been surprised that knowing them and hearing them echo in my head 1,000 times over is not the same as saying them out loud. And when I was talking about things like some of the sexual trauma I endured during my marriage, I kind of, and what the lasting effects of that have been, I kind of really integrated it. I really knew about it. I really felt it. It was there. And it had an additional level of gravity when I actually said it out loud and told somebody exactly how I felt and exactly what was going on in my head and exactly what the effects were. And that really changed the picture of what it is. So what was this sort of theoretical murk where, because in your head, memories and thoughts and projections, while you can't move forward in life, or you can't move backwards in life and time travel backwards, your head can exist in all these states almost at the same time. And that's where I've always been, is this stuck in this moment, or these moments over the last few years, and they pop up as though they are present phenomenon. And they're not, but I can't move past them. I can't put them in my rearview mirror. And saying them out loud kind of fixed them in a moment of time and made that admission what it was. So I think probably what I have to do in going forward until I can really interact with the level of help I need is just more talking about how I feel. Speaking it out loud so as to make it real, so as to fix it as something in time. Because like I said, I do sit in this murk of past, present, and future of my memories and my experiences and what I project to be the thing that's coming down the road, and smush them all together. So I always live in this murk of what could happen and what did happen, and the ex-wife's cheating and how she was going to dump it on me and how she was going to celebrate and take back her life and look all joyful about how she's got a joie de vivre that she's dumped me. I've gamed that out so many times. It was my big source of dread. It was something that always filled me with dread, and I always lived in that projected moment when it was well off in the future. And so when it hit, it was kind of like, well, I've gamed this out. I know how this is going to play out. And it went better than I expected. But it could have gone significantly better still. And probably because of the nature of the people involved, it kind of had to happen. So it's not like I had a future I could turn away from. But, living in that dread in advance of it doesn't really do me any good. And living with these sort of feelings I have kind of murkily fixed, always floating around me, instead of being able to travel, to be locked into the past and be something I can gain distance from, is hard. But I think the resolution is talking it out. And how to talk it out, I'm not sure. But according to this video, maybe a DIY approach. It may be that simply saying what I have to say is not good enough, but will do. And either I'll just put it out there and nobody has to listen, or I will put it out there and people will listen to it. Maybe some of this strikes a chord with other people. I just don't know. I don't know if people go through this stuff all the time. My partner and I, we talk about life, and we talk about how we want an easier life and we want things to get better. And we also talk about how we wonder, because this whole self-improvement movement nowadays, it's a question of, if you just try hard enough, you'll reap a great big future. Your future will be awesome. Will be easy to live with. You won't have a lot of suffering. It'll all get better. You'll win. And I don't know if that's an illusion or a trick peddled to people so that they hook on and they buy the products associated with this dream of the easy life. So maybe what's happening is we're all in the shit. We're all in this hard life. It's not easy. Stuff comes along and hits us, and we just stoically keep on rolling. And that some people are louder when they step on things, and some people are a lot more quiet and discreet. And I don't know. I think I had wished to have been quiet and was instead, in a passive aggressive way, bitchy loud. And I really needed to instead just find a way to be heard, as well, have other people hear me, as well as just hear myself say it. So, like I said, the exercise of fixing stuff in time so they can move into the past. So that's the idea of why I'm saying this now, and probably why I'll probably do more like this in the future. I had intended to do a lot more instructional, helpful things with the whole rebuild project, but that's kind of thoroughly disabled. So that's really not a big thing anymore. I think because rebuild is sort of talk of rebuilding, as though something is busted and you're just going to put it back to the way it was instead of a new model. And this isn't about the rah piece now. What I'm talking about, this is just simply sharing and making something real. So, yeah. In hopes of closing us off, this is the first one of these, sharing stuff